Welcome to the session on behaviorism. Behaviorists view language as a part of human behavior, verbal behavior. They explain language in terms of stimulus, response, and habit formation. Language is a change in behavior caused by exposure. Behaviorism emerged during the 1930s and 1950s. The major proponents of behaviorism are Ivan Pavlov, Thorndike, B. F. Skinner, and J. D. Watson. Let us now see what conditioning is. Conditioning refers to the molding or shaping of human behavior or the behavior in any organism. Desired behavior is induced through repetition and reward. Undesirable behavior is eliminated through punishment and absence of repetition. So behaviorism mainly explains language using conditioning. Conditioned learning. This refers to a change from one pattern of behavior to another pattern. There are two types of conditioning. The first one is classical conditioning and the second is operant conditioning. Let us now see what is classical conditioning. This was put forward by the Russian scholar Ivan Pavlov. To understand this type of conditioning, we should be familiar with terms like stimulus, response, and so on. You might have noticed touch me not plant. If you touch that plant, then its leaf changes its prior position. So your touch is the stimulus and the leaf's action, that is the response. Here, Ivan Pavlov has done so many experiments using dogs, and he tries to conclude that learning a language is just like a habit formation based on stimulus-response association and substitution. When you give a stimulus, normally it elicits a response. Here in Pavlov's experiment, two stimuli are introduced at the same time, and the response that one of the stimuli naturally elicits is evoked by the second stimuli as well. There are two types of responses. First one, unconditioned response, and the second one is acquired response. Let us see how an organism performs an acquired response. So we should get familiarized with stimulus 1, stimulus 2, and the response. So this experiment by Pavlov mainly consists of a dog and the first stimulus S1, that is food. The second stimulus S2 is a bell, and the response, which is denoted by the capital letter R here, it is saliva, salivation by the dog. At the sight of food, that is S1, the dog salivates. Then, immediately before giving food to the dog, a bell was rung, that is stimulus 2, S2. This was repeated. S1 and S2 are given almost at the same time. After 7 days, he rang the bell only, but he did not give any food to the dog. Still, the dog salivated in the same measure as before. Thus, the response of salivation, which is originally confined to the sight of food, is now evoked with the sound of the bell. So here we can understand that salivating at the sight of food is something normal. That is unconditioned response. But here what the dog did is it salivated merely at the sound of the bell. So this kind of response which we could elicit in the dog is called conditioned response. Salivation at the sound of the bell is an acquired response and it is called conditioned reflex. As we all know, there is a natural bond between S1, food, and response, R, that is salivation. This natural bond between S1 and R is used for conditioning. One must note that S2, that is the bell, must be presented together with S1, that is food. They must be presented together repeatedly too. And now we saw what an acquired response is. This is also known as conditioned reflex, that is the dog's salivation at the sound of the bell. Here the organism plays only a passive role. Let's now look into the educational implications of classical conditioning. This can be used for developing good habits in children such as cleanliness, respect for elders, punctuality, etc. It can be used to break phobias, fear, anxiety, etc. It can also be used to develop a positive attitude towards learning. And classical conditioning makes use of audiovisual aids. This can also be used to teach alphabets and arithmetic principles, such as counting. The theory emphasizes the importance of reinforcement in learning, and it becomes effective when they are rewarded immediately after performing well. Next, we move on to operant conditioning, which is also known as instrumental conditioning or reward learning. This was introduced by B.F. Skinner in the 1930s. This type of conditioning is based on certain operations or actions which an organism has to carry out. There are basically two types of responses here. They are elicited responses and emitted responses. Skinner devised a special apparatus called Skinner box to conduct experiments. The Skinner box contains a rat, a lever, and a device for delivering a pellet of food. Every time the rat presses the lever, it gets a pellet of food. Gradually, the rat learns to press the lever to get the food, and the response by lever pressing is strengthened because it brings food. Skinner gives great importance to operant behavior, which is more concerned with response rather than stimuli. Skinner used the term R-type conditioning. By R-type conditioning, he meant that operant behavior is more concerned with response rather than stimuli. The organism plays an active role here because it operates upon the given environment. In this Skinner experiment, we find that stimulus is the hunger of the rat, and the conditioned response is the rat's action of pressing the lever. There is no previous bond between the stimulus and response. Since the reward was quite satisfying for the rat, it repeated the action. So, if the reward is satisfying, then the action is repeated. So, this action reward sequence gradually forms a bond. Let us now look into the educational implications of operant conditioning. This creates maximum satisfaction to the learner and minimum frustration. It modifies undesirable behavior of maladjusted children. This helps in developing human personality. Reinforcers like praises, blames, and grades can be used to develop motivation in students. These reinforcers should be used periodically, and the teacher has to define the task and reinforce the child's correct response to increase the possibility of its recurrence.